welcome to the February 7th, 2023 meeting of the Sherborn School Committee. My name is Amanda Brown, and I call this meeting to order at 5:59 p.m. We are pleased to hold this open meeting in person at Dover Sherborn Middle School this evening, and we're also live streaming with DSC TV for those who wish to view remotely. Please note that this meeting is also being recorded. First on our agenda this evening is community comments. We have provided a Zoom link for those who wish to make a comment, but for whom it is not possible or preferred to attend in person this evening. Before I read the preamble to community comment, is there anyone who would like to make a comment this evening? Please raise your hand if so.
Jane's here for financials.
Okay.
There's nobody on Zoom.
No one on Zoom? Okay. So that is community comment. So our next agenda item are reports and updates. We'll start with Ms. Poi.
Great, thank you. I just have a few updates. The first is that we had a very successful community forum last Tuesday with Dr. Carlos Hoyt, focused on our diversity, equity, and inclusion work as a district. Thank you to Christine for being there as a listener, as a member of the school committee. We had roughly 45 people, including 3 school administrators and 5 school committee members, and the rest were parents and community members who joined us. Originally, we had sent out a format that was going to kind of provide some frameworks and groundwork for our discussion, and then we were going to have table discussions about questions that people had about our steps forward that I had presented at the joint committee meeting, and then take feedback. And early on in the process, Carlos was great. He picked up on the fact that people kind of had questions they wanted to ask out in the open for other community members to hear. So we shifted the format to meet the needs of the audience, and so it ended up being roughly an hour of questions and answers. I answered some questions, Carlos did, as well as Denny. And the sense that we got when people left was certainly there was a lot of information that was provided. People felt a little bit more comfortable and confident in the work that we're doing. We did advise them to go and read the frequently asked questions, which have a lot of the same information. But some of the takeaways, I think that we need to think about as we communicate and move forward around sharing that the data that's helping formulate our work around DEI as well as the strategic plan moving forward needs to focus more on multiple data sources and not solely rely on the NYU report, which we've looked at our Metro West Adolescent Health Survey data. We have Challenge Success data. We have SEL data. We have MCAS, all of those things. So just making it publicly known where we're drawing all the pieces of data from. Another is something that I admitted at our joint school committee meeting, and that in our attempt as school leaders and district leaders to communicate about addressing the social emotional needs of our students coming out of the pandemic, as well as our desire to be very transparent in our work around DEI, a lot of our communication is focused around SEL and DEI and not so much on the amazing academics that are happening every day in our classroom. So we as district and school leaders can be better about making sure that we highlight both or all of the above. And the other takeaway was just a reminder that something we would have done anyways, but taking a measured approach to any of our work, whether it's around DEI or anything, and just making sure that we continue to check in on what's working, what's not, and shift as we go. So we just be cognizant of the work that we're doing. So that was the community forum. Just a quick update on human resources. So as you know, the Collins Center provided a audit of our central office organization last year. You've all read a copy of it. We have since contracted with Dr. Tom Campbell. He's a retired HR director from Needham and very well respected in the field of education. Dr. Brown knows him from another life as well. He spent one day with us already in district, meeting briefly with the 4 central office administrators, our principals, and some of the key people who help with the HR functions within the central office. And he's coming back again this Thursday to do a deeper dive and spend more time with us individually to ask questions. And he's also conducted a survey to do some follow-up questions beyond what the Collins Center had already done in their report. So we'll continue to keep you updated as to what his recommendation is in terms of a potential HR position moving forward. And we're cognizant, obviously, of the budget timelines that can be considered as you approve your final budget. The calendar task force, as you know, we adopted a calendar for next school year, but we are very eager to have a more comprehensive process about looking at the needs and desires of our community in terms of which holidays and observances they celebrate, and how to do that, within an academic calendar. So I've reached out to 2 districts, that just went through this process and asked that they share their timeline and kind of the action steps their task force went through in the survey, so that we don't have to recreate the wheel. We can start with something and tweak it to meet our own needs. And in the meantime, thank you. I believe Christine has volunteered to be your member on the task force, and hearing from the other committees as well. And we'll be certainly reaching out to educators and our parents and students to get volunteers as well. So awesome. It's a work in progress. We're getting there. Tier focused monitoring. So we go through cycles, 3-year cycles with the Department of Education at the state level to look at our programming. And so thanks to Kate McCarthy, we just finished our special education audit, and thanks to Denny's hard work, we just finished our civil rights and our English language learner audits. So they're in the process of writing up their final recommendations, and we will share them with you. I think preliminary results say that we have lots to be proud of and that we're doing many things well, just small tweaks that we can make here and there to make our services for kids a little bit better. So we will keep you posted. In addition to the state audit, I mentioned that Dorsey Yearly and Deb Levine, who had done our special education audit in 2018-19, and looking at the reorganization of our administrative structure within special education, came back to do round 2 as a follow-up to see how's it going, is the new reorganization working, are we meeting the needs of all of our students in district and out of district. And so they are just finalized their report. We are meeting as a central office team this week to review it and talk about it and think about next steps. And then, of course, if there's any changes to our structure or any budgetary implications, we again will try to get that to you before we roll out the final budget. And lastly, this is a highlight, feel free to jump in. It's been a long couple weeks. The weather has not been helping, but as the final stage of our entry process, we've met with leaders, we've met with town officials, we've met with community members, parents, educators, and in the last 2 weeks, Denny and I have gotten to meet with kids, which has been an absolute highlight. So thank you to Dr. Brown for pulling in some fabulous 4th and 5th graders. I just wanted to share a few highlights, and if I miss any, please jump in. But we asked them what they love about Pine Hill School. Number 1 answer, the teachers. They're nice and flexible. It's a welcoming environment. The equipment, although old, works well. They love the music and the band program, all school meeting, and special days, including Global Play Day, which was just last week, Beach Day, Pajamas Day, etc. They find learning most engaging and meaningful when they have things like Open Studio for art, when they do science and get to create and learn at the same time, physical activities, math games, book clubs, because, quote, you get to use teamwork, listen, fulfill your promises of what you were supposed to read. It's fun. You get to work with friends and talk about books. What could be better than that? That's awesome. The Beatnik Cafe is a huge hit, as well as poetry, because you get to write freely. And passion projects during your win block are big hits. And then in terms of suggestions, you need to write these down. Air conditioning, shocking. A microwave in the cafeteria for students to use. 4th and 5th graders can probably use them by themselves, but the younger ones will need adult supervision or maybe a 4th and 5th grader to help. If we can continue to use technology more as a tool than as a toy, that would be great. And an option for indoor recess, even on nice days. Those are the big ones. Anything I missed?
I think so.
No? Okay. And that's our report, combined report. So happy to take questions about any and all of it.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions?
On the audit, you mentioned a number of them, but are they executed internally, meaning somebody's reviewing something else, or is it involving external sort of input as well? How does it work? And how do those function, I guess?
So it's both. So myself and Denny's former role, Denny and Kate, all prior to have to upload documents and evidence of certain standards under civil rights or special education. They then review those documents. Then they send people from the Department of Education to the site to interview people that are relevant. In ELL, for example, they met with our director, our teacher at the secondary level, some of our gen ed teachers just to talk about what the program looks like. They sometimes talk to students and parents. And then they go through our records, the ones that we actually have on site, to make sure that we are documenting everything that we see. We document in the protocols and handbooks that they read ahead of time.
So these aren't just sort of like what we think are best practice. These are really informed by outside in
and mandated by the state.
Yes. Cool.
Quality. I don't know what they call that in the business world. Quality review.
Quality come up with
something like that.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you. Dr. Brown.
Well, good evening. Today was the 100th day of school, which at an elementary school it's a high holiday. And it was beautiful to see, especially our young learners, come in with collections of 100, and the random items that the children find interesting is always interesting to me. But it was an extra festive day. As you know, as parents of Pine Hill students, our first semester report cards went home last week, and we're rearing into late winter and planning for spring. Progress reports, reports on student progress, etc. Our parents and caregivers will have an opportunity for in-person conferences officially in the upcoming weeks in March. I talked in my report about we're expanding our Hill Reservation experience for fifth graders this year. As you know, our partnership with Broadmoor provides amazing naturalist education experiences both at Chickering School and Pine Hill School. And we started to customize experiences for our fifth graders through Hill Reservation, which used to look like a lot of fun at the end of the year with some consecutive days. And our teachers have shifted that over the last few years. So we now do a day in the fall, a day in the winter for the first time ever, and a day in the late spring. And so our students will be partaking in an early March field trip at Hale, which hopefully will involve snowshoeing. I also heard the fourth graders ask you for a snow machine. I noticed that didn't make it into the high priorities.
It's in the longer list.
But we might need to make some snow. But so we're really excited about taking the outdoor education experiences through the lens of the 3 seasons that we are in school. Lots of professional development. I included just some highlights here. As you know, we're very committed to partnering with Metco Inc. and the wonderful professional development opportunities that they provide throughout a couple different intervals during the school year. We always are very proud to send Pine Hill teams in conjunction with all of our Dover Sherborn schools. Our teacher leaders have been working with Denny to cultivate tools and protocols to audit our curriculum. We're always looking we're trying to always look through fresh eyes at the objectives for teaching and learning to make sure that we are bringing the most robust, standards-based, and hopefully, as you described right from the mouths of our students, engaging and exploratory and problem-based applications for the real world across all of our content. So the last early release day, and again tomorrow, our teaching teams and job-alike departments, special subjects, etc., will be meeting together to continue that work. And it's again, we're always trying to look through fresh eyes, but in a very organized way. So we're teachers have been pulling in Denny and other content experts from our district to make sure that we're using real meaningful and broad perspective kinds of resources, and always trying to integrate the engineering and technology and thematic where we can tie curricular themes into bigger picture learning units of study is most meaningful for our students. In addition, our teachers, you've heard us talk about that we're piloting some math programs that better meet the Department of Education's objectives for mathematics learning. We're also piloting social emotional learning curriculum. There's different resources that we have access to, and you've heard us talk a lot in the last couple of years through the lens of the pandemic about making sure that we're providing social emotional learning supports and explicit instruction for students. We want to make sure that our students, the social skills and competencies that children get through the osmosis of a social learning environment isn't enough. We want to make sure that there's explicit skill instruction and powerful intervention strategies for kids who need extra support to make effective progress in those areas. So our social emotional teams, which are psychologists, counselors, behavior specialists, and our social emotional coach will be meeting tomorrow to take stock of what our teachers are partaking in through curriculum piloting, where we're seeing investment, where we're seeing effective instruction, and where we need to continue to branch out to look at resources that are available and what other school districts are using and finding productive and a good match for the student needs. I talked about the educational assistant training that we do monthly to make sure at this point through general education and special education, we have about 20 assistants who work at our school, and we want to make sure that those folks are on the front line taking direction from all of the special ed department and the classroom teachers, and we want to make sure that we're calibrating the support that we provide and the training that we provide. So I talked a little bit about that. So that's sort of the big blush of what's going on the Hill. I'm going to try not to get distracted with all of the nuances that I like to talk about, so we save time for other conversations, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Anyone have questions? I know Beach Day was a hit.
Beach Day, our students are famed for writing, in opinion type writing. Our kids get very good at sharing their compelling thoughts and ideas with me and others. And I recently received a student letter about why we were the best school ever because of Beach Day. So I love the variety of opportunities that excite kids, and different things excite different students. And I always giggle at how the kinds of feedback we are blessed to get from our students. It keeps me giggling in my heart and on my toes intellectually. So
it was a good dose of warmth too, to sort of look in the summer bins from just a glimpse. I
don't know how the teachers felt after we threw 60 beach balls into the audience and then send the children back to class right after that. But I'm sure it all went swimmingly, I should say.
All right, thank you. So that brings us to our warrant report.
Yes, it's actually a 2-pager today,
yes.
Based on the length of time since we last met. So you have warrants approved or processed by us all the way from November 20th through February 2nd. So you'll see that's been busy paying lots of bills. And again, if you have any questions, we keep copies at central office, and always probably more than welcome to stop at town hall and request to see them as well.
All right, thank you. Any questions about any of the warrants? All right, so I think we can move on to the financial reports.
Yeah, so as in keeping with tradition, any new information that's provided to you is in bold, and you'll notice that it's all bold in the out-of-district arena. We have took a little while, a little longer than normal this year. I think Department of Ed is a little slow. There's so many new grants and so many new things that are happening. I think their process in many of the normal operations has slowed down. So it took us until like January to actually get circuit breakers so that I could break it out at the region level and know how much was Sherborn, how much was Dover, and sort of really see where we are with our over budget situation in Pine Hill or in Sherborn for the out of district. So I gave you a little bit of a breakout of our total circuit breaker number, just so you understand the components. So there is a small amount that we get for in district. So those are students that we're keeping in district who services that we provide that to them exceed that threshold, which is about a little under 49,000. And so we do recoup some of in-district special ed expenses. So we almost 25,000 for last year. The bulk of it, though, is out-of-district tuition, which was 287, and we're starting to see more in transportation. So almost $60,000, $55,000 in transportation, which is actually considered a little bit of a bonus for us because we don't take into account in our budget receiving transportation because it's so new now. It's uncertain when years it's going to be funded and what years it's not going to be funded. So until there's more of a historical perspective on that will always sort of be a little extra for us when we look at the budget. So I did take trying to explain all the numbers to you, and I did a little roll forward, both looking at how we budgeted in the general fund and then how we applied our circuit breaker amount. So you'll see that I just refreshed everyone's memory that we had $440,000 budget in the general fund, and we were using $360,000 of circuit breaker. Those are sort of two funds on our books, and we then take our out-of-district tuitions and costs and put them in against either one of those, right? So if you look at the general fund, we budgeted $440. Right now, we have actual estimated to date of about $664,000. So that's a $224,000 deficit that we have in what we're managing in the general fund. I did a roll forward for you for circuit breaker. You can see what our balance in circuit breaker was on July 1st. Of this year, which was $164,000. In your $360,000 that we used towards circuit breaker, $160,000 of it was money that we were carrying over, and then $200,000 is what we were estimating to be at about the 60% reimbursement level for current year reimbursement, and you can compare that to what we actually got, which was the $294,000. So I'm just trying to show you the different components to understand that. So we had $458,000 of circuit breaker available for what we were going to charge against it. And we do, if you recall your budget, there is one educational assistant for special ed that we do charge the circuit breaker. And that sort of mimics that in district that you're seeing. So we're a little over, but normally it's a right round that time. So we do like to use the circuit breaker to offset the in-district operating budget because it was money derived from in-district expenses. And then we have our tuition, the remaining tuition estimated to date that we had been charging to the circuit breaker. So if you look at all those numbers, we're at a deficit of $163,000. So if you take those two numbers together, and then I sort of show you the general fund and circuit breaker combined so you can see the total picture, we are $387,000 sort of in an unfunded position. We do know the town has a little more than $100,000 in a sped stabilization fund that is definitely sort of there for these purposes. And I also think that we can move that educational assistant who is being charged a circuit breaker into the general fund. We have some salary savings in a couple of line items that I think will allow us to absorb that. So we're really looking to sort of come up with reserves of just under $260,000. And that's as of right now. As we all know, the special education out of district population can be very volatile, but this is what we're estimating right now as what our needs are going to be for additional fund appropriations. Any questions on all those numbers? So we have, we've been talking about this, I think, since we came back to school, that we knew we had this situation. We'll now work with the advisory committee and see how we can sort of put steps in place to come up with the reserves we need if the town wants to use the sped stabilization fund as a source. It does take a vote of both the school committee and the select board to be able to use those funds. That will sort of deplete that, so it'll be more of the town to sort of say this is what we have and this is how we'd like to use the monies. But we have been sharing this, like I said, since the fall, but we now sort of have all of our numbers in place so that we can see what we really need to ask the town for.
So do those conversations happen kind of parallel to the budget conversations, or are they separate? Or
This is separate because this is really just living in the current year.
Okay. So next year it's an open question about what we may need.
Well, hopefully next year, hopefully next year we have everything in the budget that we need and we won't have to be looking. So I've been in this position, I think, for eight years. I think this might be 8th or 9th year. This is the second time, that since I've been here, that we've had to go ask the town for additional funds. It happened my very first year, which I think is why I was so strategic in making sure that we kept a safety net and circuit breaker so that we didn't have to go if we had some unexpected placements. We actually had circuit breaker and we could manage it within our own funds. We were pretty aggressive last year to, I think, meet the budget number that we wanted and really used probably more circuit breaker. It wouldn't have mattered because we had sort of over, but in any given year, sometimes that 60 to 80,000 definitely protects us from having to go ask the town for additional funding. So you can see when I talk about, when we move to talk about fiscal year 24 and where I'm estimating what circuit breaker is going to be and the little safety net that I think that we should hold for school committee to sort of manage, you can sort of, it makes more sense when you see things like this that happen. But there was a lot going on, unexpected placements, which has brought us to this sort of predicament right now, and there's no way to avoid it.
Yeah, thank you. Are there other questions about out of district?
It's also incredibly difficult to forecast.
Yeah.
Not just, it's not an avoidance, it's more of, somebody moves in, somebody, circumstances change.
You're protected though when people move in. There is a safety net for you. So, but our situations were existing Sherborn residents. And so, because there is a move-in law that does protect you from having situations like this if someone moves in. The sending district actually remains responsible up until a certain point. So this is more of this our own residents in town changes in their needs. So we didn't have a recourse to go, for a move-in type situation.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you for.
And everything else remained the same on year. The in district, if you look at it, it looks great. We're operating right at budget.
Good. All right. So should we move on then to the FY24?
Yes.
Budget.
And just like Department of Ed.
Just one other question.
Yeah.
So, sort of thinking sort of macro level, pandemic is being sort of officially touted as over. Does that affect any of grant funding or other kinds of things that you have pocketed in various places that affect sort of the general day-to-day? I know that we've used a lot of ESSER and other kinds of stuff, but just want to make sure that we're aware of those things and impacting any decisions that we make for the remainder of this year.
No, not for the remainder of this year. No. And I think that as we've talked about, we've been very strategic about how we use the ESSER so that we wouldn't be in a situation where when it was all gone, we were going to be looking for additional. So you'll notice that we have used ESSER at the 2 elementaries a lot for educational assistance because we've wanted to have, we might have had to have it during the hybrid, right, to have more coverage. And then 2, we've added 1 or 2 just for the additional supports within school to catch up from the loss on learning. But we've been incorporating those positions into the budget. Next year, you'll notice we still have 1 or 2 in Sherborn that are on ESSER, but we'll determine the needs for those. And if we need at least, it's not a big chunk of people, we'll work it into the fiscal year 25 budget. But everything else, we used ESSER more for the one-time sort of purchases, a lot of technology, purchasing of one-time curriculum needs. It's actually, as I mentioned before, it really helps us accelerate, bringing on some new things because we had funds available and it was an allowable expense to purchase, some additional of our ELA, some of the math pilot programming, some of the things that we wanted to do. We didn't have to wait till the next budget cycle. So with that, we've strengthened, I think, what we're doing, but it's not expenses that we'll have to repeat necessarily on an annual basis.
Great. Thank you. All right. So FY24 budget discussion. We're continuing that conversation, but we're not going to vote on the budget until March.
Exactly, because we really don't have much new information to share this evening with sort of figuring out where we are on out of district in fiscal year 23. I did look at our projections for fiscal year 24. I was able to look at the transportation amount and make sure we had enough in the budget for that, given that Accept has approved their fiscal year 24 rates. You will notice I talk about that there was a 17.5% increase in per mile. But where we didn't have to change our number in your budget was that we had some students age out and graduate, so there's less miles that we're paying for, but the dollars are going. I had the dollars to pay for the increased miles of the students who are staying, and it literally worked out to almost within $1,000. So our number that we have in the budget is good. Had we not had some of those students age out, we'd be here saying that we need a higher transportation number. So that was beneficial. And then I took a quick look at the proposed circuit breaker for next year using our expenses that we have now, and could, without pushing it too much, add another $20,000 to circuit breaker. So we had done the initial budget using $300,000 with just knowing what the costs were and making an estimate. When we went out and proved it a little bit better, it's looking closer to $320,000. So in your version 2, we will use an additional $20,000 in circuit breaker, which will reduce your ask to the town by $20,000. Other than that, everything is still in progress, as Beth mentioned. We've got special ed review going on, the human resource review, although I will say the human resource component of any budget will be low at the 2 towns, because really the human resource need is at the region. And so I'm not expecting anything material at the 2 town levels. It's more of a position that will be focused on the region, since we are human resources at the region. And we're, as you know, in contract negotiations with all of our bargaining units, so really don't have any information to share on that. So with that, we will hopefully have some pieces of new information to bring forward. The best picture we have of the budget for fiscal year 24 on March 14th. So we will present, when we open your meeting, we'll present version 2.0, and then we'll close and go into your budget hearing. The public budget hearing, and then after that we'll close, more discussion, and then you will approve your final budget that evening. Just a couple of meeting date changes in your memo. So there you have the Amanda, Beth, and myself will be meeting with Sherborn Advisory on February 15th, and then on Saturday, March, it's 18th, not the 25th, for the public hearing of the advisory. So that's the day-long session at Town Hall. And then the Sherborn's annual town meeting is scheduled for April 25th. So at that point, that's when the budgets are officially approved. So those are the dates on the calendar. The capital budget. So Dennis sat through the capital budget meeting with us with the Sherborn Capital Budget Committee last week, I believe it was, and we did present the one project that we have for Pine Hill, which is the EMS upgrade, energy management system. I always remember I need to tell people what that is. Prior to that meeting, we were able to get an updated quote from the vendor who's actually completed the EMS upgrade both at the region and at Chickering, and so based on what we've already done here, he was able to make that quote a little bit more favorable for us. So we're brought forward a number to the capital committee of $40,000. That's a little bit below the $75,000 that you had approved in November. So we are bringing your capital budget forward to you this evening to approve the new number. So it actually is officially approved by the school committee. And then we just talked a little bit about, just looking at the Pine Hill building from a higher level about the future of it before we start looking at some of the larger capital expenditures that we have coming down the pike, mainly the rooftop, the roof covering, I'm sorry. So that is something that we just sort of mentioned to them to sort of step back and look at this as a broader topic versus just little bitty projects here and there. So with whatever the committee would like to do on that front is something that we can, talk about in the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Any questions? I think we'll start with budget in general, and then we can focus on capital and do our vote to approve that new amount.
Yeah, and feel free, because so you have a lot of information in your budget book. We talked about that in November. We've had several school committee meetings since then, listening to presentations. So if you go back through and you have any questions, just pass them along to Amanda, and we can incorporate those into our version 2 if there's concerns, or we can give you further, more detailed explanations of things too when we present in March.
Maybe less of a question, more just sort of, it'd be interesting to know for the next meeting, once sort of the hopefully final rev will be ready for this. It'd be interesting to know sort of what was close to the line that didn't even make it, or that you had to kind of make judgment decisions on in terms of like, we've only got so much money, what are we going to do with it? We don't need to go into all the gory detail, but and I know that there's a lot of iterations. You're using the audits, you're using a lot of input from a lot of different places to figure out what makes sense for the services that we're delivering. But it'd be interesting to know kind of what were those things that were either trade-offs, or if we aren't making any trade-offs, we think we're fully kind of supporting everything. That would be kind of interesting, just so that we could get a little bit more flavor of what that looks like.
Right. I'll say that usually in our first pass, we throw out everything that we think should happen, and then so it's all out there. And then based on our discussions with the towns and what their budget restraints are, and where we might need to go back and take a second look, that's where you'll start seeing the changes. And I think that's why we like to do that, is because it's all out there, and then you can see what sacrifices or investments we're able to take on. So we'll have a memo where you start with your numbers, then we'll show you the ins and outs of, well, we have to cut this because this is the threshold we're looking to gain, and this is what we need to do. So we'll get more input about where we stand with our total budget, looking at both the region and Sherborn school budget when we meet with the 2 finance committees next week, and that'll give us a little more to sort of look at when we're contemplating version 2.0 versus also just the new information that we may come across.
Yeah.
No, the books are incredibly well done and helpful. So
Yeah.
Those crosswalks are important for us to just sort of
Yep.
take a temperature check on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think too, to sort of have a sense of what we might need to be thinking about down the line in terms of future budgets.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Air conditioning.
Yeah.
Or is the kids
Microwave.
Can only imagine what that would be.
I think the kids should be in charge of cleaning the microwave.
Yeah, right.
That will deter them from the microwave.
Using the microwave.
And when we meet in March too, we're looking at some capital improvements in the kitchen, in the cafeteria, in the kitchen area. So but the food service operation, and that we'll actually be funding through the food service revolving fund. We're looking at doing a new floor in there for multiple reasons, and we are having some freezer issues. And so, but the nice thing that I am coming from, and I feel very good about this, is that we have built up a healthy fund balance in all 3 of our food service programs that are allowing us to be able to make the capital improvements back into those operations. And so we won't be asking the town for that funding, but I want school committee to know what we're hoping to do in that area coming in the summer. So we definitely have a quote for the floors. We want to do the same kitchen flooring that we installed in the region a couple years ago. And again, get them equipment that's going to be able to meet their needs. The participation rate at all of our 3 programs, because of the free lunch, has significantly increased. So it's put new demands on sort of our equipment and our staff, but they're doing a phenomenal job. And we're pleased that has been sort of the outcomes of this, is that more students are eating in the school lunch program. And I think our food service staff do a fabulous job in serving our kids on a daily basis.
That's great.
Do we forecast that goes down? Is it becomes not free?
That's something we've been talking about. Our food service director feels that we might have hooked in enough people that it still may be worthwhile. You're definitely going to see a little bit of a dip, but I think it's had when you try something that you've never maybe tried before, it's opened the eyes, I think, to some students as to what school lunch can be, which they never maybe thought before when their parents would just pack their lunch every day. So I think they do a great job of the amount of fresh food, local food that comes into our food programs is phenomenal, and it's really the state's pushing that, which is great. We're giving money every month right now to go out and buy local with all these great food service providers. So it is pretty good food that it's not our lunch. Back in the day, probably when we went to school.
There's no mystery meat.
There's no mystery meat, no. And I will have to, so it's high quality, and I think it's convenience for the families. And even if it's not free, it's not that expensive.
Right. But there is a lot of discussion at the state level that it might remain free coming out of the pandemic for evermore. So
Yes, perhaps. But they're also saying that they're going to run out of funding in March. So we'll see how that goes.
Does it ever get outsourced? Like to
Yes.
like an Aramark or
Yes. Some school districts do outsource.
Have we looked at that or
No. We did have a study, we would say maybe in 2012, where an outside group came in and did a food service audit, but recommended that we were best to keep in-house and gave us recommendations on staffing, pricing, so that our program would be successful. And we've only built upon that, I think. So you lose a lot of your, I don't want to say control, but the creativity when you outsource. And I have seen school districts outsource and then like pull it back. It's not always that great.
The menus are very creative.
Yes.
Yes. All right, thank you. So are there any questions about the capital, particularly the energy management system upgrade that we need to vote on?
I think it's important. I think it'll give us a lot of insight to help us get data to answer questions that will inevitably come up as we kind of progress over the next couple of years. So aside from the benefits of being able to manage some of the costs on utilities and other kinds of things that are realized virtually immediately, I think it'll also give us a lot of information to be able to make better decisions longer term. So,
Thank you. Okay, so can I have a motion, please, to approve the new amount for the EMS upgrade?
so moved.
Thank you, Dennis. Second?
Second, Christine Walsh.
Thanks, Christine. Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so that
Thank you.
motion passes. Thank you. Anything else on budget? Okay, so our final agenda item is to approve our consent agenda, which includes the minutes from the November 15th meeting and approval of preschool tuition, both of which are in your packet. And I know we have one change that Dennis brought to our minutes for November 15th, which is that I was not there, so I did not call the meeting to order. Dennis called the meeting to order. But other than that, I don't know if anyone else has any changes. All right. Is there anything we need to know about the preschool tuition?
No, this is just your annual step that you take every year to set the rates for that upcoming school year.
All right.
How do we land at 2.5 versus other cost increases?
Well, we did 1% last year, and because we were coming out of sort of the pandemic, we did 2.5. Naomi O'Brien did look around at other competitive programs that were our comparative programs, and we look at what we think our staffing increases may be and try to keep in line with that. So that's how we came up with the 2.5.
Thank you. Okay, could I please have a motion to accept the consent agenda as amended?
So moved.
Thanks, Dennis. Second?
Second, Christine Walsh.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that is the consent agenda. If anyone has any items, oh, sorry, there's communications for your information, regional school committee meeting and Dover school committee meeting minutes from the fall. And if anyone has any agenda items for our March meeting, please send them my way. And I think that's it. All right. Do we need a motion to adjourn? Yes. All right. Could I please have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Dennis. Second?
Second, Christine Walsh.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everybody.